Okay, Hashem Hashem Baruch Hashem. We're holding now in the 11th shir, the 11th shir in Hilchot Shabbat. We did have one review shir, so really 12, but this is the 11th new information. We're still in the mitzvot asay, the positive commandments of Shabbat, what to do for Shabbat. This week being Hilchot Oneg Shabbat v'Seudat Shabbat, and the laws of the Seuda Shabbat and the laws of enjoying Shabbat. Again, we are in the Tzurba Rabbanim, volume 17, the Lax Family Edition, the Paris Family Volume. Our shiurim are sponsored by the Mizrahi family, and they should be blessed with everything good. Okay, we're going to start on page 105, and we're going to start with the Rambam. So the Rambam tells us, Arba Dvarim Nemru B'Shabbos, four things are said about Shabbat. Shnayim in Torah, or two of them from the Torah, V'Shnayim in Divrei Sofrim, and two of them are from the Sofrim. Whenever it says Sofrim, that means from Nach, from Nevi'im and Ketuvim, from the Nevi'im. Vehem Meforshin Al Yedei Nevi'im. It's explained through the Nevi'im. Shibet Torah, in the Torah, it says Zachor V'Shamor, to watch Shabbat and to remember Shabbat. And in the book of Yeshaya, it explains what this is. Kavod ve'oneg. It's honor and enjoyment. Shenemar v'karate l'Shabbat oneg v'l'kadosh Hashem mechubad. So, honor and enjoyment of Shabbat, it's part of Shabbat. Where do these psukim come from? So it comes from Yeshaya, Perik Nun Het. How do you remember which Perik it's in? Very simple. Shabbat is Menucha, is a day of rest. Perik Nun Het Noach, Perik of resting. So in there it says, Im Tashir Shabbat Raglecha. This is something a lot of people say on the Kiddush of Yom of Shabbat. It says if a person restrains his foot because of Shabbat, and he does Hashem's will, and he honors Shabbat, and he speaks not about the worldly things, but he speaks about Shabbat, then this will be a light, as titanagal Hashem v'katicham te'aretz, and it will bring him many, many good. We spoke about in the past the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon made a distinction between kavod and oneg. Kavod, the Vilna Gaon said, is something you do before Shabbat, and oneg is something you do on Shabbat to enjoy Shabbat. So the Gemara Masechah Shabbat asks, what is something that a person can do that's considered enjoyment on Shabbat? Mango. What do you do oneg with? Rabbi Yehuda Bar Shmuel B'rei Shila Mishmei Rav Amar B'tavshil Shetardin. They made a special at the Talmudical times a dish of beets, lav lavu. Okay, that was a special dish they make for Shabbat. V'dagim gedolim, and big fish. V'roshei shumin, and heads of garlic. A certain way they prepared it was very, very special delicacy. That's considered oneg Shabbat, special foods to eat on Shabbat. Rav Chiya bar Ashi Amar Rav, afilu davar mu'ad, doesn't have to be such big stuff. Even something extra special, but it's small even, but it's something extra special for Shabbat, that's also. V'lechvot Shabbat asu, and you did it for Shabbat, harei oneg, this is considered oneg. Mahi, what's an example? Amra papa, he said the hirsana, small fried fish. It doesn't have to be big fish, it can be small. Something done a little extra for Shabbat. Something, a lot of people do this. They go to the store, they buy jelly chocolate rings, they buy this candy, this snack, that dessert, this dessert. That is the L'chvot Shabbat called just oneg Shabbat, to enjoy some food of Shabbat. Okay, so we know about oneg, enjoying Shabbat, and there's going to be some more stuff we're going to see, such as sleeping, learning Torah, is also considered oneg Shabbat. We'll see that in the further of this year. Now we're going to move on to the mitzvah of the 3 meals. What is the source for 3 seudot of Shabbat? Tanur Banan, source number 4. Kama seudot hayav adam le'echol b'Shabbat. How many seudot does a person have to eat on Shabbat? Shalosh. Rabbi Hidka omer arba. So machoket right away. You have the Rabbanan say you need 3 seudot, and Rabbi Hidka says you need to have 4 seudot on Shabbat. Amar Rabbi Yochanan v'shnehem mikra echad darshu. Both of them are learning one pasuk. It says, in Shemot 16:25, Vayomer Moshe, Ichluhu Hayom, eat today. Ki Shabbat Hayom, today is Shabbat. La Hashem, Hayom, today, Lo Timtza'uhu B'Sadeh. you won't find the mun in the field. How many times say the word hayom? 3 times. Based on those 3 hayoms, you have to eat 3 su'udot. So why does it say 3 or 4? This is the machlokes. Chizka savar hani telata hayom levar meorta. Chizka says it's 3 meals you need during the daytime, and the one in the night before is not counted. Hayom during the day, but there's also one at night that's not counted into the 3. So how many su'udot in Shabbat? 4. Rabbanan savre b'hadei dorata. Even though it says hayom, it means the day of Shabbat. So even the night, and then the 2 during the day, that gets to 3. Okay. Right. That's the 3rd. Night is 1, and 2 during the day gets to 3. That's the way that Rabbanan learned. Rav Chizka says no. 1 at night and 3 during the day. We don't hold like him. We don't hold like Rav Chizka. No, not talking about Mavamaka. That's a different thing. That has nothing to do with that. No. So what do some people do? I've heard some people do. They make like a Shabbos party on Oneg Shabbat, right? And after the second meal, right before Seuda Shishi, they take out candies, cookies, cake, that. And some people say, "Oh, this is the Rav Chizka's Seuda." Right? You don't have to wash for it, anything like that. But that's the Rabbi Chizka's meal. All right, so maybe the kiddush is the Rabbi Chizka's Seuda, and you don't need bread for the Seuda. You can go pot, but the kissing and other stuff. So, but there is an opinion. We don't pass him that way. We say we need 3, but the Rabbi Chizka had his opinion. Now, these 3 Seudot, we saw it comes from the pasuk that says Hayom, Hayom, Hayom. So the Rabbeinu Tam's student, Rabbi Eliezer of Metz, the Sefer Yeraim, he says that it is a deoraita. Eating 3 meals on Shabbat is a deoraita. If you look on page 108, V'tamad hukara, it's a pasuk. And he says it is a deoraita. And it's not just Rabbeinu Tam's student that says this, there's actually other Rishonim that say that as well. The 3 su'udot with bread on Shabbat is a deoraita. The Aruch HaShulchan says also, V'halavush katav shehem min haTorah. The Lavush also says that it's a deoraita to eat 3 su'udot. Kidichtiv till tahayom. It says hayom 3 times. Now the Aruch HaShulchan himself says maybe it's not mamash min haTorah. Maybe it's not exactly biblical, but rather mikol makom v'dai mitikantem Moshe Rabbeinu hem. It may be Moshe Rabbeinu made the takana. So it's like it's an ancient custom that's from Moshe Rabbeinu's time to eat 3 su'udot. Maybe it's not the oraita. The Kolbo, on the other hand, the Kolbo wants to say it's an asmachta. The pasuk is an asmachta. The pasuk is not necessarily telling you that this is the oraita. You have to eat the 3 su'udot. Rather, the Chachamim are leaning their approach on this pasuk. But then you always have to deal with how do you learn an asmachta, right? Take a look at note 4. This is very good just to know generally on page 108. Generally, when you learn the Gemara and it says it's an asmachta, what does that mean? Some authorities view this as a kind of indication in the Torah that halacha should be a certain way, but it's too indirect to have a status of a deoraita, meaning the Torah is hinting to it. The asmachta can be viewed as the Torah is hinting to this, or that this is midrabanan and the rabbis plugged their mitzvah based on a pasuk. So which way do you look at it? Is the Torah hinting it, or the rabbis have this halacha and then they find a pasuk to plug it into? All right, how do you look at it as asmachta? Okay, so we had 3 opinions. We have the Kolbo, the Rabbanan. You have the Levush. You have the Sefer Yereim says it's the Oraita. You have the Aruch HaShulchan that has something in between. It's not a Doraita, but it's kind of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's something that's from ancient. But it is quite an important mitzvah. In fact, the Rambam in source number 8 says, Chayiv Adam L'Ochel Shlosh Su'udot B'Shabbat. Person has to eat 3 su'udot on Shabbat. Okay. Now, who's chayav in this? He doesn't say in here in the Tzurba, but we'll take a moment outside in the Yaakov Yosef English edition where he deals with who is obligated, and he says over here, Gam hanashim chayavot b'shlosh su'udot Shabbat uvalechem mishnah, that according to all opinions, women are also mechuyav in the 3 su'udot of Shabbat, including su'udat shlishi. There is no. It's not that the women are not obligated. Women. We're going to talk about diet, but even women are obligated. Everybody's mechuyat in shalosh seudot, right? Unfortunately, what happens, and we'll talk a little bit more of this about in the Seuda Shishi section, is that the men eat Seuda Shishi at home, the women are all alone, and they don't bother making Seuda Shishi, and that's a problem because it's a hiyuv, according to many, a deoraita hiyuv. Okay, and that means the women are obligated and they don't do it. So many have a custom to go home to their family, so the family knows you have 3 seudot on Shabbat. This way, every Seuda is eaten with the family. People should do what they need to do, but it's important that everybody knows that it's a Seuda on Shabbat is all 3 Seudot. Everybody's obligated in it. The end of the Rambam, take a look at the end of the Rambam. The Rambam writes, with Tzarech Likvoa Kol Seuda, you have to make every Seuda from this during the 3 Al Hayayin. You have to have wine on the 3 Seudot. Now, we don't do that, right? You only make Kiddush on the 2. So, but they kikarot and they use 2 breads. So, what is the Rambam saying about the wine? He's saying you need wine at Seuda Shishi as well. So the Piskei Teshuvot wants to say the Rambam is not saying Kiddush, right? The Rambam is saying you should drink wine. Like wine was a special drink, and on Shabbat you're supposed to have special food and special drink. So you should have wine. And the Piskei Teshuvot says that today maybe people don't drink wine during the meals, Stam. So maybe you should have the drinks that people like, the special drinks that people like for the drinks. You should have that for Seuda Shishi Gamken. So it's lav dafka according to the Piskei Teshuvot that it has to be wine. But many people are makbid, and to be yoitz, the Mishnah Berurah says that many people are makbid, and to be yoitz, the Rambam to drink some wine during Seuda Shlishi to fulfill that Rambam's opinion. Okay. So we've seen that it's possible that the 3 Seudot are deoraita, Takana Moshe Rabbeinu, and maybe it's the Rabbana. We saw the Chiv as men and women. We have to eat 2 breads. Now the question is, when do we eat these meals? So are there set times for it? So Tosafot in Pesachim wants to tell us that if someone did not eat the Friday night meal for whatever reason, he wasn't feeling well, he wasn't up to it, he didn't have food, whatever it is, the Tosafot wants to say over there that possibly he can make up the Seuda the next day. The next day. He should have 3 Seudot on Shabbat day if he missed the Friday night. And in Rabbi Nachshon's Sefer over here, he brings this down as well. And he writes, one who's unable to have a meal on Friday night may have an extra meal during the day to make up for the missing meal at night. Okay, this is from the Ramah. The Ben Ish Chai brings this, that a person should make his 3 meals during the day if he couldn't make it at night. So make up. So what about the day meals? What about the second meal? Is there a time frame for that? So the first meal is Friday night. Couldn't make it Friday night, you can make it up Shabbat day. Does the Shabbat morning meal have a time that it has to start by? So the Aruch HaShulchan wants to say, he says, Lefnei Daiti Tzricha Liyot HaSuda Hashniya Rak Kodim Chatzot. He said you have to start the Seuda of the morning time before Chatzot. And he writes again in the end over there, Barur, it's clear, Sheseuda Shniya Tzricha Liyot Atzilta Al Kol Panim Kodem Chatzot. You have to start it at least before Chatzot. V'chein ani noeh. Says the Aruch HaShulchan, it's clear to him that it has to start the first meal before Chatzot. Now in the winter, that can be a little bit early. Some people, right? Chatzot is 11:40, 11:50. It means technically, according to Aruch HaShulchan, you have to be starting earlier. Says the Or L'Tzion, he says as well, on page 111, you have to start the second Seuda before Chatzot. He says this is from the Zohar. This is from the Arizal. He says, why? He doesn't call it Seudat Hayom. The Shulchan Aruch calls it Seudat Shacharit Shel Shabbat. What shachrit mean? Morning. It's got to be before chatzot, he says it implies. Lo katav seder seuda shniya. Mashmad zmana b'shachrit dafka. Shulchan Aruch implies as well that the second seuda has to start before chatzot. The Pri Megadim, on the other hand, he says that the truth is the issue is not about starting the seuda before chatzot. The issue is not fasting half a day. Okay? Therefore, he says if you tasted something, right? If you eat something before musaf, so before it becomes chatzot, you ate something already. You had a coffee, you had some milk, you had a tea, you had a little cracker, you had a piece of fruit, whatever it was, a little cheesecake, okay? And this way you're not fasting, so then it's not going to be a problem, and you can start your seuda after the 6 hours. You can start it after chatzot. That's the Pri Megadim. So outside of the Tzurba for a moment, and in the Yalkut Yosef, let's see how he formulates these halachot based on what we just spoke about. He says on Shabbat day, one should hurry to eat after completing the morning prayers before 6 seasonal hours of the day. Right? Lechatchila, you should start your seuda shniya before chatzot. You should not delay it. Even with tefillah, you shouldn't delay it with learning Torah. You have to go and start it before chatzot. He says the cantor of the shul should pay attention to the time, so people can come home on time and start the seuda before chatzot. But then he writes, if one is aware that you're in the shul and they're going to start and stretch and you're going to finish after chatzot by the time you get home, so then make sure to eat or drink something beforehand, so then you won't be fasting. Okay, and the same applies on Yom Tov, Rosh Hashanah, everything like that. So seems to be that everyone hold a chatchila. You should start your seuda shniya, second seuda, before chatzot. If you know it's not going to be, you should at least taste something before, so you won't have the problem of fasting. Okay. What about eating bread? The requirement of eating bread, right? Especially nowadays, everybody's on a diet. The bread is out, right? Keto diet, the Atkins diet, whatever diet it is. So what do we do? Shulchan Aruch says, Seuda zo, this Seuda, he's talking about Friday night. B'shel shachrit, and the morning, efshar la'asota v'lo pat. You cannot make the Seuda of Shabbat without bread. So all those people who are dieting, okay, they don't have diseases to bread. They could eat, they just don't want to. For Shabbat, it's a chiyuv, possibly a chiyuv d'oraita. They have to wash and eat bread. They have to eat bread. You cannot make a Seuda of Shabbat without bread. Okay? Shulchan Aruch says further how much. When he's talking about Seuda Shishi, he says how much bread you're supposed to eat. He should eat a kabetza. Right? The Magen Avraham says not just a kabetza, you have to eat a shtickle more than a kabetza. So a little about 55, 56 grams of bread. The Mishnah Berurah says, yes, Shulchan Aruch, Magen Avraham, they're all saying kabetza, but that's the lechatchila. But the truth is, with the avad, you can be yotzeh with eating a kazayit of 27 grams. The Yalkut Yosef on source 18 tells us that is true. But do remember that if you are going to plan to eat only a kazayit, then you wash your hands nitilat yadayim without a bracha. Because the only time you can wash your hands nitilat yadayim with the bracha if you're going to eat a kabetza of bread. If you're not going to eat a kabetza of bread, then you're going to have to wash without a bracha. So if someone's on a diet and they only want to eat a kabetza to be yotzeh eating bread on Shabbat, then they should have to wash, but they wash without a bracha. Then nitilat yadayim, make a hamotzi, they eat a kazayit of bread. Okay? Because otherwise, you have to make sure you're eating a kabetza. And not only you have to make sure that, you also have to make sure that once you make the hamotzi, you should be eating the shear within at least 7.5 minutes. Okay? That's why the minhag is to have all sorts of dips on the table, that you want to eat your bread with all sorts of dips, and within the first couple of minutes, you already have that kibbetzah in you to be yotzeh the chiyuv of eating the kibbetzah within 7.5 minutes.
Just the dips.
No, just the bread, not the dips. It has to be the bread. No, the shear is mentioned in Seuda Shishi. That's where the Shulchan Aruch says it. We'll talk about that. We'll get to there. Oh no, because there is a difference. We'll explain it. It's brought down. When we get this, we have a section on Seuda Shishi. The Tzurba now deals with, unfortunately nowadays, we have some people who are allergic. And we have people who have celiac disease and other diseases that they cannot eat gluten. What are they to do? The Shulchan Aruch says very simply, if he eats, it's not good for him. Right? He's sick. He eats, it hurts him. He can't eat. The az oneg hu lo shelo echol lo ya. For him, oneg, him enjoyment of Shabbat not to eat, then he doesn't have to eat. Okay? So again, if a person is just dieting, then he should eat because it's not something that's making him, it's not damaging him. He should eat bread. But if someone is sick to the point that he eats bread, it's going to hurt him, or anything on Shabbat, someone says, eat fish. Fish for you is disgusting. It bothers you. Or something gives you heartburn or whatever it is. You don't have to eat those stuff because it's a problem. So let me just see 1 second what I wrote over here. One is exempt from the obligation to eat 3 or 4 meals with bread on Shabbat if eating kazayit bread causes one discomfort or threatens one's health. A person may not refrain from eating the 3 meals for purely dietetic reasons. Just wants to be on a diet. Since the exemption only applies to a person from whom eating will cause him harm. Okay, so make that distinction. Now, here Rabbi Rimon in his Tzurba over here, he talks about what can be done for a celiac type of person. So the truth is, we have chamisha minadagan that you can make bread out of, right? What are the 4 or 5 grains? No, what are the 5 grains? I mention it all the time. In English, what are the 5 grains? Okay, what is what? Okay, 4 out of the 5 have gluten naturally, and 1 of them don't. And we know which one doesn't have gluten? Oats. Oats is the one that's gluten-free. Now, the problem with oats, they're usually grown next to wheats and barley and other grains, so they cross-contaminate. Therefore, someone who's really allergic, like celiac disease, can't eat gluten, having an oat that was cross-contaminated is problematic. But today, Baruch Hashem, they have pure oats, 100%, guaranteed. There's nothing else in it. As such, a person who is gluten-free and can't eat gluten, they have oat bread, oat chalot. In fact, you can even find oat matzot on Pesach. They're a little bit more expensive, but they are 100% perfect to use. So there is something that people can use if they have these allergic disease and stuff like that.
Find also wheat.
Right, that they now synthetically they make wheat that they pull out the gluten from it. Right, so there are options. Person who's in this matziv should go into it and find what he could have, what he can't have. But it's important that there should be 3 su'udot with bread on Shabbat. Moving on to the next section, the prohibition to fast on Shabbat. So it says the Rambam, asur litanot, it's asur to fast on Shabbat, and to cry out and to ask for supplication, to entreat for mercy b'Shabbat afilu b'tzara, and even if a person is in a tzara, min hatzarot she'atzibur mita'anin, that usually you would sit in ta'anit and cry about it. You can't do that on Shabbat. Only, and he makes exceptions, if your city is surrounded by goyim, or if there's a ship going down, something that's very imminent and something that's very personal at the moment, then there is room to do these type of things. Now, it's not just fasting the whole Shabbat. Says Yerushalmi, asur litanot ad 6 sha'ot b'Shabbat. Even fasting up to 6 hours. And that's the whole thing about eating before 6 hours, because you're not allowed to fast up to 6 hours, says the Gemara in the Yerushalmi. The Bir Halacha says this Isser of fasting on Shabbat till 6 hours is an Isser d'Rabbanan. Shulchan Aruch puts this into to law, and he writes in source 24, asur litanot b'Shabbat ad 6 sha'ot. You're not allowed to even fast up to 6 hours to Chatzot. You're not allowed to fast on Shabbat. And the Ramah says a very important piece. Va'afilu lomedu mitpalel asur. Even means even if you're learning and davening, that's why you're so busy and you can't eat. Even that's asur. You should not be learning and davening when you need to eat before 6 hours. Figure out your time schedule, but make sure you eat before the 6 hours. Mishnah Berurah makes one more diuk. And he says that's if it just happens that you're fasting to 6 hours. That's asur. But to plan to fast on Shabbat, to plan to fast with Shabbat, afilu sha'a ahat asur. That's even asur for one moment. Right? To plan to fast, you're not allowed to plan to fast on Shabbat. If it happened, you shouldn't go up to 6 hours. But if you're planning to fast, there's asur right away. The Yalkut Yosef does make one exception.
It's lunch. It's summertime.
Yeah.
12 o'clock. From school until Seuda Shlishit, it's 7 o'clock. It's already 7, 8 hours.
But that's fine. We're talking 6 hours in the morning. Yeah, till Hatzot. I'm talking about you can go 6 hours in the middle of the day. That's fine. I'm talking about from the morning till Hatzot. During those 6 hours, you cannot fast that time. You have to eat something before the 6 hours. The 6 hours. Okay. The Yalkut Yosef makes one exception, and this exception is the bad dream. Okay, having a bad dream. He writes over here. I'm going to read part of it, what you have, but I have it in the English over here also. It's nicely put together. He says if a person has a nightmare during the night on Shabbat, he may not fast that day. You should not. And even if it's one of the 3 particular dreams that's very bad, what are those 3 dreams? Someone who witnesses a Torah scroll burning up. One who dreams that it's Yom Kippur at the time of Ne'ilah prayer, but one who dreams that his teeth fall out or that the walls of his house have fallen. Those are apparently very bad dreams. Even then, person shouldn't fast. He should fast the next day to take away his bad dream. But he writes that if a person is greatly distressed by his nightmare, then, and nothing short of fasting will help him, then he can fast. But and then he says, Anenu before Lokai Netzor. But then in order to make up for fasting on Shabbat, he has to fast up again either Sunday or Monday whenever he's ready to fast again. So it's you're fasting twice because of that. And then he says better than fasting is to learn Torah, do Maasim Tovim and stuff like that rather than fasting on Shabbat. But he gives that one option to fast on Shabbat for a bad dream. And it's possible to say the reason is because that fasting is a fasting that makes you feel better. Okay, because you're so worried about the bad dream, you want to help mitigate the bad dream, so you fast to take better. Same thing applies with crying on Shabbat. Usually we say now that I cry on Shabbat, right? But sometimes we'll say if the crying will make you feel better, right? So then you're allowed to cry on Shabbat. The same thing is with saying refuah shalema on Shabbat and asking for bakashas and stuff like that. So we say Shabbat himilazok, right? Shabbat's not for crying, but you can say the refuah shalema and everything. Why is that? Because saying it makes you feel better. You did something about it, right? Otherwise, it's going to be on your mind the whole time. So maybe that exists here as well. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next section, the mitzvah of lechem mishnah, of having 2 breads. Yes or no? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. If someone's in mourning, they just cry to cry. It's not like a cry to make yourself feel better. You're just crying because you're upset at the situation. Sometimes a cry is to help you feel better. It depends maybe which stage you're up to, where you're holding at it, and stuff like that. Masechet Shabbat. Okay, we have to learn this Gemara well. Amri Rabba. B'Shabbat Chayv Adam L'Tzoa Al Shtei Kikarot. You have to crack the break over 2 breads. Tichtiv Lechem Mishnah. Because it's written in Lechem Mishnah. This is in Shemot about the month. Amar Vashi Hazina Lein Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana. Dinaket Tate Uvatza Hada. He took 2 breads, but he only broke 1. Right? Amar, he says, you'll lock it to. It says together. Doesn't say to break both. Okay. The bizera hubatza achula shirutaya. Shirutaya. Okay, which means he would break how we understand this. Rashi says he means he broke a big portion. Okay, we see the Rashba doesn't learn this way. The Rashi says he broke a big portion of the bread. Amar Rashi, well, you're doing looks like you're a glutton. Summer Lake, keeping the call, Yamalo of it. The whole week I don't do this. I don't break pieces of bread. But who they covered, La mechse doesn't look kerav tunata, that it don't look like a gluttony. Okay, so basically what Rashi is saying, the way he understands Gemara, is Rav Zeir would have a bread, he would cut himself a big piece of bread that would last him the whole meal, big piece. So his student said, "What are you doing? It's so big. You look like a person, like a glutton who's eating so much." He said, "No, I'm doing it the covered chops. I don't do it the whole week. I do it now the covered chops." Okay, says the Maggid Mishnah. He says, a person has to break bread over two loaves, and the Gaon wrote, that means every time he eats, even if you're not eating a Seuda on Shabbat, you're just eating bread, you should break on two. Okay, every time you eat on Shabbat, you should break on two. That's what the Gaon said. The Ramah writes, you're making 10 Seuda on Shabbat, each time, two breads. And then he writes for Seuda Shishi, maybe one. Okay, but he writes at the end of you should take two for Seuda Shishi. That's the Ramah. Shulchan Aruch never writes you can take one for Seuda Shishi. In fact, we say that you should take two breads for Seuda Shishi. We'll go into more Seuda Shishi soon. Just before we move on, there is another opinion of having on the bread, while on the table, 12 breads. You ever saw it? Kabbalists do it. Okay? So what they do is they do 3 and 3, like a sego, right? They put the 2 over here, 2 here, 1 in the middle, and then on the bottom, 2 levels of it.
Okay? Small ones?
Yeah, small breads. I wouldn't suggest take such big breads, small breads, and they put it like 2 segos facing each other, the points, 2 levels. You ever saw it? Yeah, you ever saw it like that? All right, and then they would take the 2 middle and make the bracha on that. It's based on the Arizal, based on other Kabbalistic reasons. And even if you don't understand the reasons, you can still do it. I know that growing up, when we had all 5 kids at home, by my parents, 3 of us were boys, right? So we eat a lot. So my father used to do it. He used to do the 12 breads, and then as we started getting married and out of the family, out of the house, so now I went down back to 2 breads, okay? Because you can't just do stuff to do. You have to make sure the bread's not going to go to waste and stuff like that. Okay, but then
what's the significance?
There is a minhag to do such. Okay, now the Rashba has a different understanding of the Gemara. The Rashba says when it says that Rabbi Zera was this, he broke a big piece. That doesn't mean he broke a big piece. Devatza al kol akikarot kama. He broke all the breads. Okay? The Rashba says you have to crack both breads, not just one. You have to do both. That's the way he understands the Gemara. That's how you understand the difference between Rav Kahan and Rav Zeir. So otherwise, they're doing the exact same thing. Shulchan Aruch though writes, and he breaks the bottom one. Okay, Shulchan Aruch says to break the bottom one. Mitzvah Shabbat, and it's a mitzvah, so he's learning like Rashi that Rav Zeir, he broke a big piece. It didn't break 2. The Mishnah Berurah writes that the Marshal and the Shelah were accustomed to cut both loaves, like the Rashba, and the Gaon Mevilna also did such. So you might have seen some people, they like to break both breads. There is an opinion that says as such. Now, the Shulchan Aruch wrote to break the lower one. Okay, so the Beit Yosef, on page 120, source 33, he says some of the custom to break the lower one, not the upper one, but our custom is to break the upper loaf, writes the Kolbo, right? He's saying from the Kolbo. I saw the great people, now the Beit Yosef is right, I saw great people who broke the lower loaf, and I heard it's correct to do so according to the Kabbalah. So the Bach has a problem with this. The Bach says, what are you talking about? We say the Ema Vinin ala mitzvot. You can't pass over mitzvot. The top one is closer to you. You shouldn't pass over to the bottom one. You have to do the one on top. So his son-in-law, the Taj, says, not a problem. No, but the top one is in front of you. You hold side by side? So I wanted to get into that, but I didn't have the sources in that. There are different opinions of how to hold it. My father also holds it like that, side to side. But I don't. Pashut, if you read what he writes, the Shulchan Aruch says there's a tachton. The Shulchan Aruch says, no, I need to. Oh, my bad. The Shulchan Aruch writes You have a tachton. You have a bottom one.
You putting the tachton.
Yeah, blama.
Huh?
Because you're putting it slightly to the side. Okay, whatever. Hold it both this way.
Huh?
So you're having a bottom. Yeah. So it's not side by side.
It's
so you have a
side,
bottom.
but bottom too.
No, it's
both.
So I tell you what the task says to do. Give me those two tissue boxes, and I'll show you what the task says to do. So you have
Compromise, no?
the task
Compromise.
says have the bottom one more sticking out to you. So now you're not skipping over mitzvah because the one that's closer to you is the bottom one. So you have, and that must mean you're holding it this way, right? I'm understanding the back, that you're holding it this way.
So what do you do?
I hold it this way. I hold two breads this way. Father came to my house. He said to hold it that way, so I held it that way, like he said. But otherwise, I hold it my way, the way I understand it to be. Now, the Aruch HaShulchan has another answer. The Aruch HaShulchan says that he says, no. There's no issue of Ein Ma'avirin al Mitzvot here. Ein Ma'avirin al Mitzvot means you have two mitzvot, and you have one closer to you and one further than you, and you choose to do the second one. Here, it's one mitzvah of breaking bread. You're not skipping anything by going to the second one. We understood mitzvah as being each bread. He's saying, no, mitzvah means an actual different mitzvah. And it's not two different mitzvot here. It's one mitzvah. So it's no issue of ma'avirin mitzvah mitzvah. Okay, that is on that. The Shmir Shabbat Kehilchata tells us what the Ramah recommends to do for which one to break. He says, "B'leil Shabbat yinich et shnei alachamim zeh al gabei zeh." You hear what he says? Zeh al gabei zeh. This is top of that one. I'm sure there are opinions that go with you also. Aval yakfid laniach et tachton karv elav min ha'elyon. Kach she'achrei bracha yichasek v'tachton ve'yivtza. He should take the one closer to him and break it. The Yom Shabbat uvleil hachag. But when it comes to the day of Shabbat, and even if it's a Yom Tov night, and in the morning, yitza al ha'elyon. You break the top one. Okay? You break the top one. So that's the Shmir Shabbat Kechata, right? Chazon Ovadia writes, there are many different customs. And everyone should do the custom that he has, and it's all okay. With the top or the bottom one, each one has its opinion. I believe they said that the Chamovadia actually always would break from the bottom one, right? The Chamovadia would always break from the bottom, day and night. And it's possible because the Shulchan Aruch writes, he doesn't say the next day to break it from the top. So possibly that's why Chamovadia did it that way. Yes, so Ariagadi, you wanted to say? No, it does not make a difference. The only problem with the knife is that it takes longer to cut it, and you really want to get to the bracha and eat it right away. Yeah, I hear you.
Have a solution. It's very easy. At first, what you do is you cut everybody a small piece, and then after you just cut the bread, the loaf.
Here, so some break the bottom bread first during all of the meals, and he writes that was the custom of Chacham Ovadia, was to break always the night, always the bottom one, just like he did at night. He always did for all Seuda. So there are other different opinions. What do most people knowing here to do? Always the bottom. The bottom or the top one? That's the question.
Whatever.
That's for a lot of years. For a lot of years, I've been doing like the Ramah, which is to do the night to the bottom and the day times the top, and Yom Tov the top. That's the way I've been known. Okay, fine. Other halachot.
What's the halacha now, or there is no difference?
Everyone agrees that at night you should use the bottom one on Shabbat. What to do during the daytime is up to what your minhag is. Al-Pi Kabbalah, the Ramah says you should break the top ones. Chamovadia's personal practice was to always break the bottom one. So whatever you feel is better for you.
Thank you.
Okay? All right, fine. Or if you want to do like the Vilna Gaon and make sure you break two. All right, each one that you're making like a Mishnah. Right? Many would do that as well.
You can do it.
Right. Depends what size challah you get. You don't get the big challah. You get the small challah. You break both of them. Okay. What about, let's say it's Shabbat morning, and the night before we had a few more guests than we expected. We ended up eating all the bread we have. Comes the morning, I have one bread, one challah one lepioshka, okay, one pita, and I have to make lechem mishnah. I know I have in the freezer another bread from 2 weeks ago. I left it in the freezer. I have a frozen bread. Can I make the bracha amotzachim aretz while I'm having one frozen bread as my lechem mishnah? So the what? That's a good question. Can I make the bracha on the frozen bread? Right. That's the question. But can I use it? Is it considered bread now? At this stage, it's frozen. I can't eat it. Is it considered bread that can make lechem mishnah on it? So Rabbi Zion Abashul says, yeah, you can do it. You can use frozen bread. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, on the other hand, was not happy with this. He says it's as hard as stone. You can't eat it now. Yeah, no one can eat it. It's inedible. It cannot be used lechem mishnah. He says, but if you plan to continue his meal until it becomes edible, then maybe it's considered like hot food that one waits to eat. Right? You have soup, you wait for it to cool down a little bit. Right? So and it's considered edible at the time that you can't even eat it. So he says maybe the same is over here. That if you're gonna have a longer meal and it's gonna become edible during the meal, maybe it will be fine to use. Just gonna see what Chamavadia writes, what the son writes in the Yalkut Yosef. So just for practice, what we can do, he says a frozen loaf of bread can be used, a second loaf for the mitzvah of lechem mishnah if one has no other bread to use. It's not necessary to wait for it to thaw, but it's good to use it, leave it on the table until it becomes edible. Okay, so just like Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he says to leave it on the table, but you could use it. Right. Better to take it out of the bag. It's better to take it out of the bag.
That's like what I want to get. He says you take it out.
You have to take it out. You should take it out of the bag. Recommended practice, the appropriate practice is to take it out of the bag. Don't leave it in the bag. Okay. Now, the Piskei Teshuvot deals with someone doesn't have proper bread. Okay. The guy, we'll make it to our question. The guy has one lechem, one bread, one challah, and then he has no other lechem mishnah, but he has a cake, a Danish, or he has a matzah, he has non toki, he has one of those big matzahs. So can he use that second as a lechem mishnah? So I'm going to read to you outside of the Tzurba for a moment in the Yalkut Yosef English edition, page 245 over here. Is it 245? Halacha 24 and 27. Well, it can't be page 245. I don't see 24 and 27 here. Okay. Totally on the wrong page here. Well, I'll tell you what he does say. He says you could do that. I don't know where I wrote it. He wrote something and I made the wrong page. But he says you could use the matzah, and you could even use patava kislin as your second bread. Okay. Could use it as your second bread. Oh, here we go. So here it is in about the matzah. If only has one loaf of bread, one may substitute a matzah as a second loaf. The matzah must be whole and unbroken and not cracked so much that it's likely to break when handled. So as long as you have a full piece of matzah, even though it's not hamotzi, you could use it as your second lechem mishnah.
What did he say about the Danish?
It would be the same for the Danish. It would be the same for the Danish. As long as it's full and intact. As long as it's full and intact, probably too small, but yeah, bigger Danish, that would be no problem. You could use it as your second lechem. Okay, I have it somewhere. I wrote it down. I don't know what I did with it. Where I put it down. Maybe after the share, we'll find the source. But I remember seeing it. Okay. Another issue. Does it have to be perfectly whole? Does it have to be complete? So Piskei Teshuvot says, as long as it looks relatively whole, meaning that you're okay with it being that way, meaning that sometimes you get the breads are stuck together, and then when you separate them, it looks like it's missing a piece. But most people's eyes, it looks like it's a whole bread, even though it's missing a little bit, then that's fine. It's considered shalom.
I heard that it's considered shalom as long as you put it into the oven, it was separated. But if you
Then it
touch
connected.
each other, then it's not
So the
considered.
Piskei Teshuvot,
It's not considered a problem.
he says, as long as it looks in the people's eyes, keeping shalom and nei b'nei adam harehu shalom. As long as it's in people's eyes, it looks like it's shalom. No one thinks that's missing the side. We just know it's baked like that. You know, it's because of the baking. That's the way it looks. So then it's fine.
That's the question.
And I don't think there's dina of pogum by bread.
It is.
I don't think so. I don't think so. It's pogum by wine, not pogum by bread. But if it still looks shalom enough, then it's shalom.
Yeah.
So then that's if it looks like it's not shalom, then you can't use it. If it looks like it's shalom, then you could use it. It really depends. Well, most people would look at it and say, what b'nei adam? What would they look at it?
If I look at it from the top, it looks shalom. The person.
So if you don't have anything else, you can do that. If you don't have anything else, you can use a bread. Yeah. So the kid eats from the bottom, and the top still looks full. You don't have anything else to use. You can use it as a second lesson. Technically. Right. Look at the next Piskei Teshuvah. If it's served in such a way that a deficiency is recognizable, it may not be taken for Lechem Mishnah. And if it was not completely severed into two, but merely split in such a way that if one would lift it by the small part, the large part would not lift with it, it's also complete. It's as complete. If one does not have another whole loaf available, it's effective to connect the two parts with a piece of wood or a toothpick, for example, and put them together. Ki'ilu, they're actually one, and that would also be okay. Okay. So if you have a bread that was cut in half, you have two separate breads, right? And they're both cut in half. Now you have the two halves. You put them together, they look like it's whole. You put a toothpick in between, and you can use it. You know, hold it together, and then it's considered Lechem Mishnah. So as long as the main thing here is as long as it looks like it's whole, right? As long as it looks like it's whole, no one's coming and inspecting it, to make sure it's completely whole. As long as it looks like it's okay.
Can I cut the bread halfway?
To make it match?
No. I mean, when I'm gonna break it quickly to give it out,
Yeah.
I want to see them break it and cut after bracha. Before bracha, I just cut it
No.
halfway.
You shouldn't be cutting.
Oh, what?
Shouldn't be cutting. They say you could make like small scores on the top of it to help you cut afterwards, but even that is not recommended to do. Even that not recommended to do. Yeah. They make a little score on the top. Says one may even use two pieces from different chalot, provided that they look similar enough to appear as one challah. Okay. Okay, fine. Now we deal with Lechem Mishnah. Let's do special food and Oneg Shabbat. Okay, so we already saw the Gemara before. Well, it says the Rambam as well. Ezu Oneg Zo Sha'amru Chacham Shitzarach L'Taken Tavshil Shemen Beyoter Rashke Bemusam. A person should make more flavorful drinks, more flavorful foods. And says the Shulchan Aruch. Someone needs money and help from other people. Still, he should work hard to make something good for Shabbat. And he should not say, make your Shabbat like a weekday. Only someone who really, really can't afford. Then he make your Shabbat like a weekday. Otherwise, eat less on the rest of the days of the week to have something special for Shabbat. What should a person have special for Shabbat? Says the Mishnah Berurah, you should have at least two cooked dishes, right? Two cooked dishes. Possibly the two is again reminder of Lechem Mishnah of the double mun that you got, right? In fact, in the laws of Shabbat, when someone brings out the minhag is, if you pay attention, at least by the Bukharians, I know this is true. A lot of the Friday night food that we would eat would be stuffed peppers, right? Kimigi, or you would have toki stuffed grape leaves, or you would have pyozi stuffed onion leaves. And he writes over there, the Syrians, they would eat kibbeh and other things like that are stuffed. The reason is to remind us of the mun. The mun was covered from all the sides, right? It came down in the tal, and the mun was in the middle. So it's a reminder people would eat stuffed foods on Shabbat. So that is another minhag to do. He writes there as well as having fish. Fish, his dog is 7, something special from before the Mabul. He writes over here, though, if you see people are making money out of the fish, Right? They're selling the fish. Right? Profiteering. Right? Fishmongerers profiteering from the fish prices. Then he says you boycott it. You don't buy fish. Right? Or you bring bingo into town, right? And they bring drop prices. But it says, yeah, you shouldn't let the stores take over people's money, take advantage of people's money. So if you see that's happening, you don't have, you can cut down. Okay, another idea that comes into, we know the Gemara tells us Chayv Adam levarech mea brachot b'chol yom. Right, as it says by Tay Yisrael, Ma'ashem Lekech Hashalom Yema, Rav Chia Bereit, Rav Oy B'Shabbat Yom Tavid Tarech Memela. He says the same thing is true with Shabbat, and a person has to have more stuff to make brachot on Shabbat with. Okay, because if you pay attention to making the mea brachot, usually our Shmona Esreis is a lot of there's a lot of brachot. We say 19 brachot, so 19 times 3 is already how much? 20, 40, 60, a little less than 60. Okay, and then you have brachot Shachar, and then you have brachot Psukei de Zimra, you have brachot Yotzer Or, you have all these brachot in the tefillah. By the time you've done a regular day, you are already high in your numbers. You eat a few seudot, a few stuff here and there, you already made 100. But on Shabbat, you must remember that our Shmona Esrei is shortened. You got 7. Okay, so you're really down the amounts. Yeah, you're really down the amount. The Birkat Hamazon flying is 4. The washing and this is that. So you come out, you're about short 20 something brachot. So I think like 21 or something brachot that you're short. So what does a person do? So he gets bisamim, he smells on Shabbat multiple times on Shabbat. That brings up the brachot. Also, you make Oneg Shabbat. You eat fruits, candies, cakes, and stuff like that. Still, if you can't get that, there's a couple of things you can do. By the way, this is all for men, right? This is men who are davening and doing all this thing. For the woman, they also have a chiyuv of 100 brachot. And for Shabbat, it's much more challenging, right? How are they going to get to it? So there's some things you can do. If you come to shul and you hear the Torah reading, some say the brachot of the Torah for the aliyot, the 8 aliyot, could be included into your count. But in order for it to be included into your count, you cannot say Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo when the person goes up to make the bracha. You just answer Amen because you want that bracha to be counted towards your 100. Okay, so you just answer Amen. Other things they say the Enkelukenu also has something to do with the brachot over there, and they say the lady should read that on Shabbat in order to get into the 100 brachot. There are other ideas that are brought down. Maybe the Chazar Sashatz, the Chazan repeating it on Shabbat, maybe also counts towards the brachot. But a person should try to make an effort to do that. The Shulchan Aruch writes, the person should increase his fruit and his delicacies and besamim in order to bring in the 100 brachot. Okay,
the Haftarah blessings also.
The what?
The Haftarah blessings also. The Maftir at the end.
They don't seem to say the Haftarah blessings is counted into it. They don't count. Okay. They don't count the Haftarah blessing into the count. Masech Sachim, Kavod Yom v'Kavod Laila, Kavod Yom Kodem. Which meal you have to enjoy more and more better foods at? The morning meal. Mishnah Berurah says that, for example, a person has a few delicacies. It's preferable to leave them for the daytime meal. And in the Yam Shel Shlomo, he was very upset. He was crying that people are not careful about this. And instead, they enjoy more their evening meal. Right, in the evening, they're having manti, they're having steaks, they're having all these good stuff in the night meal. Comes the morning meal, 1 egg, 1 tchum, maybe or shua, and that's it. Right? He says, no, and the morning meal has to be the more real meal.
Kill it.
So Sion says good. And if that's the truth, then you could eat the steak Friday night, because if it's fresh and it tastes better, then no one's going to tell you to keep it for Shabbos morning. But you should still make Shabbos morning something special. It shouldn't be lesser than your Friday night. Hatam dechvod yom kodem nearly mishum ikreya sudot heim bayom v'loy b'layla. Says Aruch HaShulchan, because the morning Seuda is the main one. V'od b'layla halachol b'yom b'erev Shabbat. He already ate all day. We actually have the Seuda chaviva alav Kivayom HaShabbat. He already ate all day. He's eating just again Friday night. It's not really just Shabbat. It's like he's just for Friday. He already ate. He doesn't. The taiva is not as great. He says the ultimate kashi ikar kedushin hanichers bayom shikir b'bo carbon musaf. You brought the carbon musaf. The main sacrifice of Shabbat was born in the daytime. The leila. There was no avodah of Shabbat in the nighttime. So therefore, the daytime should be better. What do some people do because of that? Some people, what they do is they don't have fish Friday nights. They don't have fish Friday night, so they have the fish Friday morning, Shabbat morning. So they make Shabbat morning Seuda more. Or what you can do is, what some people do, they have cold fish Friday night, and then they'll do the hot fish Shabbat morning. They do different things in order to make it nicker, something to make it recognizable that Shabbat day is the more important Seuda. Okay, so a person should keep that in the back of their mind. You shouldn't cheap out on the Shabbat morning. The morning one should still be a little bit more recognizable than it's more. Okay, that's what they say over here. What did I write over here? Hopefully I wrote the right page. Yeah. Yeah. The Kiddush is a different Kiddush, right?
The Seuda is different.
The date something.
So someone wanted to say what someone said here that the Chut Shani Shabbat states that having Chamin, Cholent or Shvo, whatever a person has, that already shows more respect to the day meal. In the Hilchot Shabbat Malka, he writes that you want to show that Shabbat morning meal is better, save the tastier dessert for the daytime meal. The better dessert for the daytime meal. That's what he writes. Shabbat Malka. Okay, fine. Moving on. We have a few more topics to touch on here today. All right. Torah study and sleeping on Shabbat. How else to be oneg on Shabbat? This is a very important me'iri, Rabotai. This me'iri is going to change your life. Listen. Mitzvat oneg Shabbat gedolah ad me'od. Uvishalmi amru b'ma ma'angu. What do you make oneg Shabbat with? Mar amar b'shena. One says with sleeping. Pillow. Okay. Umar amar b'tamut Torah. And some say Talmud Torah. I once heard some people do both at the same time. They come to the Shia and they fall asleep. Right? They do Shena v'Shena. One shot. Okay? And says the Me'ini, they're not arguing. Kam b'Talmid, kam b'Balabay. It depends who we're talking about. The Talmud, the student, or the Balabay. And my rabbis explain, Talmid ma'anago b'Talmud Torah. The Talmud, Chacham, he's the one who's enjoying Shabbat with learning Torah. And the Balabay, he's with this pillow, sleeping. But the Me'iri says, Va'ani amar hefech. I say that the Dvarim are opposite. The Talmid Chacham, how is he enjoying Shabbat? He sleeps on Shabbat. And the Balabay, he's enjoying Shabbat by learning Torah. This is why the Talmid Chacham all week he's learning. He doesn't have any time to rest. Only on Shabbat he'll rest a little bit and he'll enjoy it, and then he'll be able to learn again afterwards very well. And he said, what about the Balabay? Balabay the whole week he's sleeping. The whole week he's not learning. So now on Shabbat he has the time to learn. Right? And there's another Yerushalmi that says that the whole point of Shabbat and Yom Tov was in order to learn Torah. So it says the Me'iri that it's the opposite. Talmid Chacham sleeps on Shabbat. So I'm not saying Malon Yosef sleeps on Shabbat. He knows the Talmid Chacham, and everyone else, the Balabites, we're going to learn because we sleep the rest of the week. Says the Ramah. The Ramah says the Pauline Balibatim Shein Oiskim B'Torah Klei Meshua Yosku Yoter B'Torah B'Shabbat Min Talmid Chachamim. They have to learn more on Shabbat than Talmid Chachamim. So the Talmid Chachamim, if you see them relaxing on Shabbat, that's their oneg. We have to learn more. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what are you supposed to learn? He says, what are you supposed to learn? He says, what are you supposed to learn? The rabbis should make a shiur that teaches halakha to the people. He says, not like today, nowadays, you come and the rabbi is speaking and nobody knows what he's talking about. He's off on some tangent. He's going this way, he's going that way. Nobody knows. He's just making calculations, bringing different sources, and everyone leaves more confused than they walked in. Right? I once heard a joke. Someone says when they were in yeshiva, they were learning so in depth that nobody knew what they're talking about. And then the afternoon, they were learning bikiyut. They were learning the Gemara so fast that nobody knew what they're talking about. That's not what you're supposed to do when you're learning. You're supposed to understand what you're talking about. Some Shabbat you're supposed to teach. People know halacha. You also should say some musar. You should also say some magadata. And Chamavadia writes that today, unfortunately, people want mostly agadata. Nobody really wants to learn anything. They just want to hear stories. But he says, and Chamavadia writes that what should Talmid Chacham learn on Shabbat? So during the whole week, Talmid Chacham is learning in-depth halacha and stuff like that. Shabbat, he should learn agadata, says Chamavadia. Why? Because it's going to be a Talmid Chacham. People are going to want to hear him talk. Right? And everyone wants to listen to a rabbi talking stories. No one wants to hear him talking about what this and what that. Well, that's too complicated for them. So he says, when is this guy going to learn it? If all week he's learning halakha, so on Shabbat he should learn Haggadah. And that's going to be his oneg on Shabbat. Is he learns stories of the Talmud, he learns stories of the Chachamim, and then he'll use that later in his shiurim. The Piskei Shuvot writes as well. It's a day of extra learning because you have an extra neshama. Okay. And learning on Shabbat is like times 1,000, right? So it's a very important time to learn, and the person gains a lot from it. The Pnei Halacha, Melamed also talks about this, and he also writes, he tries to make a cheshbon of how much a person is supposed to learn, how much a Baal Bayit is supposed to learn on Shabbat. You want to know what his cheshbon comes out to? He says that a Baal Bayit should learn 6 hours on Shabbat. A Baal Bayit should learn 6 hours on Shabbat. That's our Melamed's cheshbon. I don't know if any of us can say that we get to there, but that is something that we should aspire to. The other thing is sleeping on Shabbat, and the Ramah says that a person sleeps regularly during the afternoon, whether this means every day, whether this means every Shabbat, he should continue to sleep. Ki oneg hulo, because it is an oneg, but Mishnah Berurah says, don't overdo it. Don't say I'm machmer on the oneg of Shabbat of sleeping. And I go right. Catching up doesn't work, and a person shouldn't be machmer on the sleeping part. You should sleep, but shouldn't make it a whole event, right? Some people say, "Oh, I can't make it to the shir because I'm sleeping." Okay, you didn't make it to the shir, but that's the whole point. You're not supposed to sleep the whole time. And person also needs to understand when he's supposed to sleep. Okay. When it's Friday night is early, maybe you can sleep more Friday night, right? When Shabbat is early, and then Shabbat afternoon, you can take maybe a little short nap, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then get back. And not say, I usually sleep in the afternoon 3 hours, so I'll sleep also in the winter 3 hours. That doesn't work. In the summer, that might be possible. In winter, that's not possible. Fine. So Rabbi Yosef, who is very machmer on the Oneg Shabbat, right? He says if you daven nets, then it's possible. But if you daven nets, then you're gonna have to sleep in the afternoon because you're gonna already hit.
Nets in the winter is like 7:30.
Here. Okay.
Now it's possible.
All right. The last topic for today is Seuda Shelishit, is the third meal. You should know, Chachamim say Seuda Shelishit is a very important Seuda. It megale all your other Seudot of Shabbat. What does it mean? That when you eat Seuda Shishi, Kedin, you're showing everything you ate on Shabbat was for Shabbat. If you don't eat Seuda Shishi, you're showing that what you did, you were just eating for your own stomach. So Seuda Shishi is very important. Also, Chachamim tell us eating Seuda Shishi saves you from all the trouble. So the question now is, when can a person start Seuda Shishi? When can you begin it? So it says Tosfot that it's from Mincha and on. From Mincha and on. Remember we said Hayom. There's 3 set times. So from Mincha time and on. Mincha Gedulah. Right? So 6.5 hours into the day. From that point on, person can already eat. So that's Shelishi. Says the Shulchan Aruch. Zmana Mishegia Zmana Mincha. Dahainu Mishesh Od Mechza V'Lamala. From 6.5 hours into the day. And further, Ve'im Asa Kodem Lakan Lo Kayem Mitzat Seuda Shelishi. And if a person did it beforehand, he did not do mitzvah Seuda Shelishi. Before 6.5 hours, he didn't do Seuda Shelishi. Now, it doesn't bring it in the Tzurba here, but I'll just let you know what some people do on Shabbat Sheva Brachot that happens in the winter. Okay? You have Shabbat Sheva Brachot in the winter, and you start before Chatzot, and it goes a couple of hours. It's going to go into the day. So and then you're going to finish. When are you going to have Seuda Shishi? So what some people do, it's not recommended to do this. It is a possibility. What they do is they start the Seuda, they wash, they eat fish, they eat maybe some eggs, and then they stop. Make Birkat Hamazon. Make Birkat Hamazon. They all walk out, take a little walk. Right? Don't leave anybody there. Take a little walk. You come back. A couple minutes later, you wash again, and you continue the Seuda. Now you have your Shvo, now you have Yachni, now you have your Bach, everything, because you stopped, your Seuda Shniya, took a little break, came back, you're now doing Seuda Shishi. It's the same long meal, but you split it in half. What? No, after Mincha Gedolah already. You just didn't daven Mincha yet. So you start your Seuda Shniya. It's really one big Seuda. But it's during the winter time. You're not going to have time to make another Seuda afterwards. It's 3-4 hours of Seuda. So you make it halfway. You stop, make Birkat Hamazon, take a break. Everyone walks out. They walk back in. You make another washing, and you continue the Seuda. You have now your second Seuda. Again,
that's before Mincha. That's before Mincha. That's before Mincha.
Even before Mincha, fine. And Yaakov Yosef brings it down. He says you should refrain from doing this, but it is an option. Okay, shouldn't do it, but it is an option, just to know. But the Ashkenazim, by the way, they do this. You ever go to Ashkenazim Sheva Brachot in the winter? They do this. I don't even know if they all go outside. They just make Birkat Hamazon, they wash again and sit down again, right in the middle. Okay.
What happens? Let's say Shabbat is right before Yom Tov. Yom Tov is supposed at night. You're supposed to have
right.
appetite. What they do is for Kiddush, like right after Shul, there's Kiddush. So wash during Kiddush, perhaps
right.
bread and give out bread.
That's the second meal.
Go home,
and
when their Seuda Sheniya will be Seuda.
As long as it's after 6.5 hours, that would work. The Seuda at home. It would have to be after during the time of Zman Shlishi. Right. Okay. The Mishnah Berurah brings, based on the Rambam, that a person should try to have wine during Seuda Shlishi. Okay, we already saw that before. What's the today? We don't have to have wine. The Ran comes. This is the Ran. The Ran comes and says, you don't need bread. Fruit is enough. Fish, delicacies is enough for Seuda Shishi. The Rosh comes and says, no, it has to be mizonot, minimum. Okay? But the Shulchan Aruch is very clear. Person has to do it on bread. And then he says, some say you can do it on cookies, and some say you can do it on basar v'dagim, and some say you can do it on peiros. And he says, V'svara Rishona ikar. And the main opinion is, unless the person is very full. Okay? So the real din is to do it on bread, and with 2 breads. I remember when I was in Camp Roshraga, they used to put matzot for Seuda Shishi, for Ashkenazim. Right? Yeah! But the Sfardim who knew were able to go to the main waiter and tell him Sfardi. And all of a sudden, two chalot were two buklach were given to you, and you were able to go and take it. They didn't put it out, but you had to go and ask for it. I didn't know. First week, someone said, "Aren't you Sfardi? Go get the buklach." I said, "What?" Yes, I went and I asked Moshe Rubin. Said, "He said you Sfardi?" I said, "Yeah, 2 breads." And I knew from there he had 2 breads. They know the halachot, but you have to know it too. We have to do it on bread. You have to get both. Piskei Teshuvot writes as well. He writes the order of what should be done. First of all, you should have a kibetza of bread. If you're not a kibetza of bread, you should kibetza of mizonot. You don't have that, you should have some cooked dish of the five grains. If you don't have that, then meat or fish. If not that, then fruits, a revi'it of wine, raw fruits and vegetables. But it's important to keep in mind that if you are not eating bread, then once Shkia comes, or at the latest, once Beresh Mashot, 13.5 seasonal minutes after Shkia, you're not allowed to eat anymore. Even if you're eating Seuda Shishi with cookies, you can't eat anymore. The only time you can eat your Seuda Shishi even after nightfall is if you already washed. So some people don't know that. They have Seuda Shishi on fruits, and they're eating fruits already, nightfall hit, and they're still eating fruits. You cannot eat anymore, right? Person should really try to stop at shkia. Obadiah says you really have until 13.5 seasonal minutes during the Meshachar. You could also eat mizanot and stuff like that, but a person has to know that once that's passed, he has to stop eating. He cannot eat after that point. Now the Shevet HaLevi, Chamagadi, this is your question. Why Seuda Shelishi, we can, that you can have less. You don't tell me during the morning meal, if you don't have bread, you can do mizanot, you don't have this, you can have that. You tell me I have to have bread. Why Seuda Shelishi last? So he writes over here. Bread, the difference is that the first two meals they were accustomed to eat anyway at the time of Chazal. You always ate those two meals. Thus, the bread is indispensable, even b'diavad, because they are the meals of the day, and they must meet the definition of a meal. However, the third meal is an additional meal because of Shabbat. It's not a regular meal. It's an additional meal for Shabbat. Understand? Right. So what does Hayom mean you have to eat? So we're saying the real 2 meals of a day, you have to have it on bread. Because every meal is always on bread. But the third meal, which is only something special for Shabbat, so that you can do with other things. Doesn't necessarily have to be bread. That's what Shmuel Wozner wants to say in the Shevet HaLevi, is the difference between the other Seudot and Seuda Shelishi. That's why you can do other things. Interesting. In the Hilchot of Shabbat, there is no option. Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring the option of Divrei Torah for Seuda Shelishi. Right? Some people heard it. You can say Divrei Torah instead of eating Seuda Shelishi. That is actually brought in Hilchot Pesach, where it's Shabbat Erev Pesach, right? There, he writes you can do it with Divrei Torah. And Shimon Bar Yochai used to do this. But perhaps the idea is that during Shabbat Erev Pesach, you can't really eat a Seuda Shelishi kahalacha, meaning with 2 breads or whatever. So perhaps there, where you can't do it, Divrei Torah can work. But perhaps on a regular Shabbat where you could do Seuda Shelishi, perhaps that's why Shulchan Aruch didn't bring down the opinion of eating of saying Divrei Torah in lieu of the Seuda Shelishi. The last topic on Seuda Shelishi is, what about Mincha? Does a person have to pray Mincha before eating the Seuda Shelishi? So it is preferable that a person does pray Mincha before he eats Seuda Shelishi. But if for whatever reason a person cannot do that, whether there's no minyan like that available, or it just doesn't really fit into his schedule, and it's better if he does it the other way, it is okay to eat the Seuda Shelishi before Mincha. Person can technically do that. Again, however, it is much more preferable to pray Mincha and then to eat the Seuda Shelishi. Okay? And we'll end off with this. Okay? Very good. We have 10? Yes. רבי חנינא בן הקשיא אומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות ישראל, לפיכך הרבה להם תורה ומצוות. שנאמר, אדוני חפץ למען צאתו יגדיל תורה וידיר.
Amen.